Hello, guys. Chris and Kevin. How are
How are
you?
you, Martin? Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Good to see you.
I got more
Really
coffee.
good to see you. So, we have a new guest today. Welcome to LinkedIn Live. Another Friday has arrived. The clock is 12 in Denmark, 11 in UK. And for you sitting out there just checking in for half an hour, welcome. And for you who's listening later on, also welcome on later on. It's really nice to see you guys for Danish and Coffee. We have invited Chris Warburton in because this has been a heavy week, guys. What have you
It
been
has
up
been a
to?
heavy week. Yeah. We had the affordability summit this week on Tuesday, which went very well. You guys, very grateful you guys sponsoring it. So I really appreciate that. It's great to have you guys there. And yeah, it was a busy day. We had well over 80 there, and it was we had a really good conversation. I mean, I think we started off being a little bit doom and gloom, I think, but we had some fun stuff like with buzzer rounds and saw some of the latest technologies and sort of like those kind of things. And we've had really good feedback. So
Yeah, really good audience, mixed, so a number of tier one banks and big utilities there, but also, credit unions, enforcement firms, debt resolution firms, a lot of debt advice firms in play as well, and some of the people that are a key part of the ecosystem. But more than
Yeah,
anything else, Martin, I think it just highlighted the need for the partnerships and collaborations and where some of the contenders fitted into that. I particularly liked the buzzer session that Chris did. Thankfully, he didn't use it for my presentation. Otherwise, I would have been doomed. But
and I suppose for people listening, so we had a 10-minute buzzer, and it went off after 10 minutes. So it sort of like constrained the presentation. So I think the people presenting weren't too keen on it. Everyone in the audience loved it, and I think it needs to become a permanent feature, Kevin. I think it needs to become a permanent
well,
feature
I'm
for our
with,
presentations as well. That's the thing. So
yeah, Rachel Curtis from Initio AI. She was really good. She's
yeah,
obviously
she hammered it. I heard. I had a good talk with her this
she
morning,
won to
actually,
beat
and
the buzzer, so she
yeah,
wanted an award
yeah.
for beating the buzzer. Ken from FinVents came very close. He got to his last slide on it. Gareth was, I think, a bit flummoxed early on
Uh,
because he was only on
you
slide
got
two.
big props. There were a lot of good things from people I heard already on the event. But it's funny or not funny. It's interesting. We have hosted a number of events throughout last year. We have talked about AI and AI in real life, and now this is more like I'm beginning to say this was an important event. This was also an event where a new topic came up. Not a new topic, but something that needs to have more attention. What was the reason for you hosting this event right now?
well, yeah. So I suppose we looked at affordability. I mean, affordability has been a topic for a long time now. I mean, we had the cost of living crisis in the UK, which is really, I suppose, following, the Ukraine war and COVID that sort of come across. But I suppose so it's always been a topic, and so we wanted to talk about that. And there's some great technology out there, and we had some of the guys presenting it, like folks like Paylink and Initio, i.e. have FinVents, those kind of guys, sort of presenting some of that. So we wanted to talk about it. But even since we sort of booked the room, though, we've now going to potentially enter into like an even bigger affordability crisis as well. So it became even more super relevant. And I'm talking about really over the last month or 40 odd days with the Gulf War crisis that's kind of going on. And sort of that's why we were a sort of a say paints has been a little bit doom and gloom, because I mean there's a potential there for it to have really big kind of impacts for us. And certainly I was sort of keen to sort of talk about it because it kind of feels like we haven't talked about it enough, and some of the impacts could be pretty significant.
Well, I think there's two
You,
things on that, Martin, is not only what we'll get onto hopefully in a minute with regard to the events that are outside of our control, but more importantly, the afternoon we had a lot of very appreciative people like Lee Healy from Income Max getting the opportunity to showcase income optimization. And Rob Johnson from Policy and Practice again made the point there's £28 billion worth of unclaimed benefits. That number's just going up, which
yeah,
is pretty depressing in its own right.
yeah.
But so you've got this enormous swamp of money that's allegedly out there. And then you've got somebody like Tracy from Welfare Together talking about we've helped people with £825,000 worth of money, but it's money they've actually put back in somebody's pocket. So Lee, I think, particularly stressed the point, and he's a very good speaker around the fact that income optimization doesn't get its own showcase. So I think one of the areas that was an appreciative audience that we'd managed to find a slot for that in this wider picture that I think, as Chris will come on to in just a second, is highlighting the need to be able to do that. So if there's money on the table, people need it. We shouldn't be doing that just when it's in enforcement. It should be thinking about this when you're onboarding somebody as a credit union or as a responsible lender, which is what Sam Manning was talking about in his piece with his lending platform to, in that responsible lending space, finance for all type space.
So when it's more, so you touched upon it also, Chris, that the war is going on. We feel it as citizens. We talk a lot about these words and terminologies in UK, where you have vulnerability, you have you have affordability to pay, you have all these income and expenditure check, and we don't have those functions in a lot of Europe, but we feel the same, of course. So I was just down filling my car up the other day, yesterday was, and I was like blown away about it was always 22% more expensive than I felt it was like 2 weeks ago. So, and we feel it when we go and shopping, and we feel it everywhere, and we talk a lot about it. It's all over the place. It's in the news, it's in the papers, and we feel it when we buy, when we purchase things, when we just going to run our normal life. So with all that going on, there must also be, there's a logical thing where I think people in the DCA space, in the collection space, they need to think differently, because the situation is special, as you also said before, Chris. It's a special situation. And you showed me some numbers this morning where I was like, okay, that really put something to it.
Yeah. I mean, so all of this increase in cost. I mean, I think in the UK here, I mean, I got a diesel car, and we're like at like over £1.90 for a litre. I mean, like 3-4 weeks ago, it was £1.45. I mean, it's like massive kind of increase. And what does that do for affordability of, yes, people in collections, but also people further upstream? How many more people will go into collections? How much more volume will we have going through? Because it not only does it add fuel costs for your vehicle, but also all transportation of food is done by diesel as well. So as an example, or by petrol. There's been impacts from things like fertilizer, which is going to again push up food costs. And so this is almost like starting to flow through, and it'll flow through into in the income and expenditure. The expenditure is going up, right? And does that lead to less disposable income? Does that then lead to increasing people going into arrears? And then what do we do about it? And how do we sort of be proactive around it, really?
Let's try to put some numbers on, Chris, maybe.
If we put those on. So just context for this is we've been running a daily kind of analysis, just really around sort of what could the impact be in terms of the economics, and I suppose the briefing around it. And I'm going to zoom in because it's in microprint, and sort of when maybe what we'll try and do is I've got a link where people can download it, so I'll just try and put that in the chat, and maybe one of us can just quickly put it in the chat so it appears for folks and we can download it. But just to zoom in, so I mean, we've been sort of running this every day. Oops. Try and zoom in so hopefully you can see this, just in terms of like what the scenarios could be. And obviously it changes every day, and it's sort of really running around, well, what could the scenarios be between if we have almost like a good outcome, if there's a bad outcome, or there's an extremely ugly kind of outcome, and what's the likelihood of that? So seeing these numbers kind of change, I think at the start it was much more sort of skewed towards the better outcomes. This sort of like ugly escalations actually improved versus yesterday. It was 25% yesterday. It's now only 20%. So that's kind of good. But, so for example, torts collapse, there's more war that actually happens. If we see that as an example, so if everything works well, we'll be down to like 165. So prices should go down a little bit in terms of diesel, just looking at diesel numbers, but it could be any fuel. But if it doesn't and it escalates further, we could be looking at like £2.65. I mean, that's the sort of the, we're very much talking about this middle number, and that's sort of what's in the media. But there is another scenario there where it could be like significant increases in terms of cost. And just looking at things, worryingly looking at things like CPI inflation. I think the number, Kevin, that was out was 4.6% was being talked about, which is sort of in this.
That's I talked about, which was an economist view. Bear in mind, February figure was at 3%.
Yeah, so I mean, and that could be up to like 10%, 7 to 10%. So there could be this other kind of alternative scenarios that are out there. And just look at food inflation. I mean, that's like a 15% increase in food. So there could be sort of like, this is taking time to go through, because I heard somewhere that oil tankers travel at the speed of a bicycle, right? So a lot of this stuff was already in train. But so we've got a window now between now and when this is likely to come through, which is probably in Q3, where we probably just need to get ready, because there could be some significant price increases, and that's kind of what's kind of worrying me. And then the other thing, Kevin, I think we definitely know about is that there'll be the change of the price cap, I think, for gas as well, which for electricity and gas, right? Which we know will come through. All of this has an impact on consumers and their affordability, and what will that do in terms of thinking about how do we prepare in terms of what comes into collections? Kind of makes sense. I mean, I think they're kind of scary, but this it is a bit doom and gloom. But
thanks for ruining the morning coffee, Chris, with with scary numbers. Yeah, Kevin, what do you say?
I think that's relevant here. I mean, the same space. The FCA have talked about what I talked about on Tuesday, which is this 360-degree view, and you should be looking at being proactive. And just for good measure, this week they've talked about the value of open finance, but they've also talked about what to expect to see for financial services firms in Consumer Duty Board reports at the end of July, which just literally comes into that space in Q3. But I think the bit you want to focus on here, Martin, is the top right. If Chris can zoom in on that, I think this then echoes some of the stuff I was talking about at Innovation South yesterday, with a very conservative audience in local authorities and the enforcement sector, but they're looking after council tax in the main. So you imagine all these areas again where you've got non-inflationary rises. They've got people who have to pay these bills as priority services, and this whole communication strategy piece that we talked about with utilities before really comes into very sharp focus.
Yeah, no, I kind of agree. I mean, here was what do we need to do about it? We've got this window. What do we need to do about it? And it's around, say it was segmenting the book, so understanding who's going to have affordability issues or not. And Kevin, we were just looking at different types of income and expenditure personas, so we were looking at that, and then we flowed what would be the impact of that. So how many of the types of people we have in collections or in arrears will now be more underwater as a result of it, and things like private renters really came up as being hit, those kind of things. So how do we segment it?
The LAL data really highlighted, didn't they? Zeroed in on that.
Yeah. So segmentation was number one, and I suppose relevant particularly to this conversation is like getting ahead of that and then talking to the people, right? So how do you talk to the people and sort of like offer them solutions, get them on better tariffs, making sure they're on fixed tariffs as an example rather than variable tariffs. What's the way of getting hold of people? And I suppose this links into some of the stuff that you guys do, which is how do you do that in a cost-effective manner?
So some of the partnerships here, Martin, were really important, because this is where I think the stand-ups and the challenges really work well, where you link in this narrative with what some of these tools do. So this concept of, do you have an income and expenditure in the locker? And is that a better starting point if you've got something like an AI bot just to do a top-up, so you can identify whether there are material change in circumstance, rather than expecting somebody to go through another 50-minute process, make it as pain-free as possible.
Of course. I want to raise a question to you guys who have been serving this industry for decades now. I still think sometimes I don't understand why have companies not moved before. We're not only talking about let's talk about utilities, telcos, and other companies where it leads down to this funnel. The situation is changing around the world. It's getting more and more hard. You need to reinvent yourself. You need to engage on different levels. level. You need to understand your customers a lot better to succeed with having them as a good customer and having your money paid down the line. But we still talk about all these tools where you said, oh, there's some legalization saying, in example, in the utility sector, you need to register people on the priority registration service, etc., etc. Those things, those tools has been around for a long time. All those companies here where you say, we need to do it by law. That's all I hear, or we need to do it, or we will have fines or whatever coming down. But is the real thing not really? Why don't you do it as a concept of actually succeeding more in your business? So you have a possibility with AI tools, with other engagement tools, to understand your customer before they hit you, before you are doing a buy now, pay later. Of course, now you need to do an affordability check. But why all these things that you can do to support, to understand your customer, to lead them down that journey that starts when the customer comes into the business? Why is that not on people's number one agenda? Because everything I speak about is how do you convert the best way possible? How do you connect best way with people? And you do that in my book of understanding them. And when situation has changed, and you said it yourself, Chris, it's just like 2 weeks ago to now it's already changing. Are the industry following this? Are they thinking this is a headache? We need to do it. Legalization is demanding us. Or don't they understand why it's a good idea to do it to succeed as a business?
I would steal some of Chris's earlier wording, which is a tanker takes a long time to change direction and it goes slowly.
Yeah.
And a lot of the issues here is that the sector as a whole of UK across sectors is not used to principle-based, outcome-focused regulations, and still many would prefer to work in a prescriptive way. And we also have a challenge that when we're looking at some of the, what the demands, what the regulators looking at regarding growth, when actually we're not growing. And we've got to get back to brass tacks. And in many of the change, like buy now, pay later, that was consumer-driven. And consumer-driven change is going to be really quite important. And we've talked about when we get back on track with AI, this sort of AI to AI. And if consumers start driving some of this agenda and they vote with their feet, which is we don't believe the growth agenda, we don't see how it's benefiting us, all we see is pain. What are you going to do about it when it says, and particularly we talked about VRS before, the Vulnerability Registration Service, 53% of the people responding said, I want to be communicated to in a different way to what you offer me today. And it was a bit worrying yesterday when I was down at Innovation South that people were still talking about SMS and emails if they're innovative tools. And most of us think about that is sort of relatively ancient technology in the work that we do at the moment. So trying to bridge that gap, I think, Chris, you find it with your survey all the time, is that still, the predominant contact tools are telephone and letter on it. And we're trying to find this evolution that how brings in that fact that 94% of the communication is digitally enabled, 85% have got a smartphone, and that inequality we've got to solve somehow.
I think the other thing I was thinking about when you were talking there was also humans tend to be quite sort of event driven. So we're quite event driven. So even you look in the media, right? So we're triggered by events, not by what might happen. We're triggered by what has just happened. And so this is a classic in collections, is like if default rates go up, then something happens. But you could probably seen that default rates were going to go up 6 months ago if you looked at some of the early indicators. And it's like trying to get ahead of that, which credit risk folks and collections folks do tend to understand, but it's hard to get the support to do it. But it's so important because unless we're making calls now, unless we're proactively reaching out to people, this is going to be so much worse. And we won't have enough capacity to talk to people, that we won't have mitigated any of the impacts. So like doing it now and having that foresight just makes a massive difference, right? And I think we've got a little bit of a window.
Yeah, and I love that you said they knew it 6 months before. They knew it a long time before where it was going, and it's really interesting in this space and in the gym. I come from an external outbound provider. I did sales calls for 20 years in my call. There are 700 people, 3 million calls a month. We lived that game about how do you communicate with people. You cannot take people from different areas of Denmark or Sweden or whatever and say, oh, we treat them all the same. We treat them all the same. They're in the same situation. You tailor your dialogues. You tailor your approach to it. That's how you engage with people. And I think, again, they knew it before. I'm still struggling with understanding why it's so new when I'm out talking with DCAs. Policy and practice, as an example, where you can get what you mentioned, Kevin, there's access to maybe unclaimed benefit. That is just now beginning to come out there. Oh, you put it on a website, and then a customer that owes some money can go in and calculate. Why don't you use it actively in your dialogue? Why don't you use vulnerable registration service data? We know that you are or you have XYZ issues. So if you know that, you would communicate differently by different channels and way, but just to feel understood as a client in this situation that we are living in now must make the difference. And it coming out, as I said to you, Kevin, the other day, I had a client the other day, and he's going to start up outbound with us, and he said, outbound is not working anymore. I said, what are you talking about? He said, yeah, only 2% pickup rate. Yeah, of course. What are you doing? Oh, but I'm sending calls out at 10 o'clock in the morning every day. And yeah, and then I send a letter, and then I send with the same narrative in. But that's why people are saying email response rates dropping down, call responses dropping down. It must be a sign that people are feeling different right now. They are feeling stressed, so you cannot give them options, reach out to them positively, understanding, acknowledge the situation that we are living in. I think that way you will have customers. That is where you will engage with people. If that's your purpose, to engage, start engaging positive and using those tools around you. That is positive engagement driven.
I mean, I agree on the engagement side of things. I mean, you've got the timing of engagement, you've got the segmentation, but then also what you say is incredibly important, right? In terms of actually getting people to engage, which you can do. You know, I mean, I like the idea of like putting more volume through, using AI to sort of change the message more often, you know, because all of those things are also being shown to be sort of effective in getting people to sort of pick up the phone or engage and just start that engagement. Because once you've started the conversation, then it becomes much easier to carry on with, right? So
I can give you a short little example. It's very funny. There was a big customer of ours said, we have these people as uncontactable customers. We did another campaign where I changed the SMS that was sent out before, and I changed the agent. So when we called out now, we said, this is not an enforcement call. This is a support call. Huh? But if you are thinking enforcement, oh, hey, we know that this is the stress you feel. This is a support call. The purpose is to find a solution for you. To find that solution, there are many ways. Can we offer you support? Could you get access to unclaimed benefit? Could we guide you down a process where it feels like we actually try to help you? And I think that is the way forward, especially in the situation we are in now, that you think like that.
And even says it here around famous cost of living support, not collections, right? So we sort of have some of that in terms of like, how do you think about framing it? And I say, I think we have a bit of a window to sort of get ahead on some of this stuff. You know, going down, it's things like, you know, making sure you have a good playbook, making sure you've got training in place, and sort of really understanding all of that as well. But these are sort of the immediate pieces. It's just start that engagement kind of process.
Yeah. Somebody else, Kevin, put something out. A big DCA put something out. They just launched television commercials. I saw the other day. They did gas stations before, and then they did some billboards, and now it's on telly. And
we've got a preview of it, Martin, actually on Tuesday. Dan and Aaron were there, and although it was a noisy area when we were having lunch, but Dan showed me some of the adverts they're doing. And again, a lot of this is around trying to build consumer awareness. It's Dan's pretty adamant there. It's not there to promote the digital DRA as an entity, but it's to grow awareness and the fact that there are new engagement methods. And I think, you know, I take my hat off to them in terms of what they're trying to achieve, but it needs to be consistent across the market. And I know the Credit Service Association do a lot of work now in trying to demystify this whole area. And indeed, the Credit Service Association this week have done quite a big promotion in the public services collection area, which I know is important to you, Martin, where, you know, having got the HMRC approval and the like, working with other public sector firms, and hopefully you find consistency between the public sector and the private sector where it's relevant.
Yeah. But I think that's also, as you said, that's why I think tools like AI now, of course, I'm representing voice, the voice part of it. But again, in this situation, it was actually a big, one of our clients said the other day, Martin, the best thing with having Mega in now, where we pick up all the phone calls, we do the ID&V, we transfer clients down to a human, we reduce average handle time with 1 minute and 20. But what the customer said to me was, now our human staff, they enjoy it a lot. They have a lot more time now to talk about the more sensible stuff, the sensitive stuff, the issues people are facing and standing in. It makes a better customer experience. It makes better conversion, because that's what humans are good at, is understanding these things. So I think my advice to the whole sector, based also on what Chris is showing here now, it just show even more, or put more on the fire on, hey, you simply need to think differently, and I think you need to do it faster, sooner than later, to make an impact. And I think what the digital GA, whereas we have talked about them in quite of discussions now, but I just think the narrative is so exciting. Let's try to support and help.
Well, the challenge, is both short, medium, and long term at the moment. So Chris and I have just put a number of notes out regarding, even what's going to be in your Consumer Duty Board report in July, which is talking about what you're doing now, but what you're going to do in the following year. But we've been looking at things like the Mills review around AI in financial services, and that's expecting firms and directors to have a vision for the next 5 years. And that's sort of been reinforced this week by the regulator, saying you probably need a view. And in your board report, we want to see commentary. So, I love what Chris does with dashboards, but you need to go beyond the dashboard and look at how this impacts your business. So when you look at that top right and said, how many clients have I got in these groups where I should be proactively engaging with them? And it can run to millions of clients. And I think that was interesting, even with the Lowell research, when you look as a debt buyer at how many million clients they're touching, and how many people they've got an interest in, whether it be one debt or five, these are areas when you look at your own business model and said, how does this affect me and the people that I deal with? And I've got to have a view, and it's got to be accessible to the regulator if they come knocking and said, can I see yours and what you think is going to happen?
And Kevin, I was going to say, so if you've got 1 million customers in that, I think the question is also around, can I demonstrate I've done enough to get hold of those people as well? So if you're capacity constrained and you only have so many people, it's like, have I done enough to actually get hold of them and put this stuff in front of them? And how can I demonstrate that I've done enough as well? Which again comes back to, we're going to have to use some sort of automation. I don't like the idea of it just being sort of like fire and forget necessarily. And I think that's where things like telephony and sort of like more in kind of engaging kind of channels, you can show it, and then on the dashboard you can then show, well, look, I'm actually getting the engagement, or I'm not getting engagement, or we've attempted so many times, or all those kind of things, and you'll be able to demonstrate it and evidence it. I think, that's kind of my take. We chat about this a fair bit. But
I love it. I think that's the cool thing when we are sitting on both sides of the table and thinking different kind of thoughts, where you all think it's also, what do I need to achieve to keep the regulator happy? What do I need to present to my board? What kind of things and that's of course all the things that you need to do and document and make sure, because it also shows that you do something. I just want to say again, I think you should be super motivated to do a lot more than just keep the FCA and regulators happy. I think you should simply do it and go that line in a fast way, because look at where the world is right now, and it doesn't look like it's getting a lot better. So to engage with people and keep your goals, that must be to engage and solve the problem that you are here to solve, then look differently on the case and adapt. There's a lot of tools out there. You guys are presenting things. You've
got 2 minutes left, Martin, and you need to talk about what you're going to be talking about at the Civia event next week in London. I'm on a panel session then, and Chris needs to give us a quick update on the AI governance event we've got coming up in
June. What's your topic, Kevin? What's
so
on your topic?
I'm with all of the regulatory boys in the panel from the other trade associations, with the Credit Service Association, Finance and Leasing Association, and the Enforcement Conduct Board, you're doing the exciting bit beforehand where you're talking about AI.
Precisely, and how that could be a part of the solution instead of not. And so that's my bit on it. Chris, in the last little minute.
Yeah. So we got an event coming up in May. It's going to be down in Milton Keynes at the BSI offices, and we're going to
June 25th.
Is it in June? So I'm getting my months. We got in June. That gives us a little bit more time to prepare for it, making sure we do that. But it's going to be around AI, and particularly talking about some of the AI governance kind of aspects of it, and sort of like, so we talk a lot about sort of like where it can kind of take us, but also we're trying to be very practical around like how do you sort of turn this into reality, governance standards, very sort of practical kind of use cases, those kind of things, and sort of like it may be a little bit less exciting, but it's going to be sort of like very practical and like this is how you use it and implement it into businesses as well. So that's
so a lot of speaks. A lot of speaks on the regulatory part, on the governance part, on the how AI, voice, other channels can work for you guys out there to actually solve some of the challenges that the world are facing, that we are all facing. Thank you for you all joining us this wonderful Friday from Copenhagen and UK. It is now half an hour in, and we wish you a fantastic Friday and a good weekend. Kevin and Chris, always nice to see you guys. Thanks for joining in, Chris, with valuable advice and good context.
We got another guest next week, Martin. We got another guest.
We got another guest next week. I can already say who it is. It's Alastair Skiers from BPO Collection is joining us next Friday to talk more about how does it then actually work when you deploy voice AI out there. Have a wonderful Friday, all of you.
Thanks very much. See you.